Within hours of a televised interview, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett called out Donald Trump's actions live on air. By nightfall, things took a turn no one expected. The screen had been split in two. On one side, Donald Trump stood at a podium in Orlando, repeating his stance on the federal investigation into his handling of classified documents. On the other, Jasmine Crockett sat across from a CNN host, microphone clipped to her blazer, her expression unreadable. Then it happened. No. Jasmine said, voice steady. Let's not twist the facts. The president didn't just mishandle classified files. He stored them in a golf club closet in Florida, next to rain boots and a box of outdated magazines. She didn't flinch. That's not speculation. It's from the FBI's own inventory. A flicker of discomfort crossed the host's face, but Jasmine pressed on. And about misusing federal funds, I'm not alleging. I'm citing the House Oversight Memo from March 11th. He redirected FEMA resources to cover private security during a golf retreat. Again, documented. The studio fell silent except for the hum of the lights. The host shuffled his papers, caught off guard by her precision. Jasmine wasn't being dramatic, she was being surgical. Within minutes, clips of the interview spread across TikTok, Reddit, and X. Reactions divided instantly, some shocked, others elated, a few furious. But one reaction rose faster than the rest. Donald Trump Jr., watching from a leather armchair in his Manhattan office, exploded in outrage. She just leaked national security intel live on air, he tweeted. I'm calling the feds. This is treason. He wasn't bluffing. Within an hour, he had called both the FBI and Capitol Police, accusing Crockett of exposing sensitive information and demanding a federal investigation. Inside Crockett's office, there was no panic. Just confusion. I didn't say anything that isn't public record, Jasmine said, scrolling through notes on her tablet. Her communications director, Tyrese, looked up. Are they serious? We literally cited documents from the congressional record. You think they'll actually follow through? Another aide asked. Jasmine looked up, calm but sharp. If they do, we'll be ready. And she was. The first call came at 4:12 p.m. Her office was notified that a formal ethics inquiry was being opened. Minutes later, a journalist from the Arizona Ledger asked for comment. By early evening, Jasmine Crockett was trending nationally. Hashtags like hashtag Crockett versus Trump and hashtag Truth or Treason surged across social media. Outside, Washington, D.C. carried on. People walked their dogs, argued over parking spaces. The world didn't stop. But inside that office, something shifted. Jasmine closed her laptop and stared out the window. This isn't about classified documents, she said quietly. It's about fear. They saw someone speak without stuttering. And now they're scrambling. Tyrese nodded, eyes still on his phone. You just picked a fight they weren't ready for. Good, Jasmine replied. I'm not backing down. The tension wasn't just about defending herself anymore. It was about what came next. Lawyers were watching. Cameras were rolling. Voters were paying attention. And Trump Jr. had just thrown gasoline on a fire he wouldn't be able to control. Later that evening, a sharp knock at the door cut through the low murmur of conversation. Her team had just finished reviewing every word she'd said against official records. Everything was public. Nothing classified, but when Jasmine opened the door, it wasn't a staffer. Two plainclothes agents stood there. One carried a black folder. The other kept his hands in his pockets, posture stiff. Congresswoman Crockett, the first one asked, though he clearly already knew. Yes, she replied. We'd like to speak with you briefly. Inside, Tyrese stood up fast, nearly knocking over his laptop. Jasmine raised a hand to calm him before turning back to the men. Who are you with? Capitol Police Intelligence Division, the agent answered. We've received a formal request to initiate a preliminary review for potential violations of National Security Code 798. She didn't blink. But something twisted in her chest. Not fear, exactly. More like irritation. Disdain, that's for knowingly leaking classified material, she said flatly. Everything I referenced is on the congressional record. You're welcome to check the timestamps. We're not making accusations, the agent replied. Just following protocol. That was the thing about protocols. They were often used to justify nonsense. Jasmine gestured for them to come in. Tyrese hit record on his phone, placing it face down on the table. A soft red glow flickered for a moment before disappearing. The agents asked the expected questions: where she got her information, whether she'd been briefed off the record, if she was aware of legal boundaries regarding declassified materials. Jasmine answered every one of them, clear and calm. No defensiveness. No hesitation. I don't guess when I speak, she told them. I read. I verify. I cite. The informal probe lasted just under 30 minutes. When the agents left, the office went quiet again. Tyrese sat down slowly, staring at the blank wall behind Jasmine's desk. They really sent someone over, he said. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, slipped off her heels, and dropped them beside the desk. You know what that was, she said at last. It wasn't about national security. It was about shaking the tree. Seeing if anything fell. But they walked in here like you were some kind of leaker. I know. So what, we're supposed to pretend that's normal now? No. Jasmine said. We document every minute of this. Outside, the building was nearly empty. Capitol Hill had gone home for the night. But the news cycle didn't sleep. Neither did the people chasing the next political spectacle. Tyrese forwarded the internal video feed to a secure server. Jasmine opened a private message thread with a trusted journalist she'd known for years, someone who never twisted her words for a headline. I might have a story for you, she typed. But only if you'll tell it straight. By 10:23 p.m., the first story surfaced online. Trump Jr. pushes probe into Crockett's live TV comments. By midnight, it was everywhere. Right-wing blogs branded her reckless. Some demanded she be removed from her committee posts, but the real conversation, the one that mattered, was happening elsewhere. Inside kitchens, cars, and late-night group chats, people weren't talking about security risks. No one was debating treason. They were asking why Donald Trump Jr. would call the police over something so obviously public. It felt off. Feels like he's trying to scare her, one post read. He's rattled, said another. They don't like it when someone speaks that plainly. In living rooms across Ohio, Arizona, and Pennsylvania, people who hadn't known what to believe a few days ago found themselves watching Jasmine Crockett's original clip again. Not to catch a mistake, but to figure out what exactly had gotten under Trump Jr.'s skin. The bigger questions were just beginning to surface, and Jasmine was already working on her next move. By morning, phones buzzed nationwide with breaking news alerts. Morning shows looped Jasmine's CNN appearance, pausing, rewinding, playing it again like it held the key to something more. Anchors debated whether her words were a bold act of accountability or a legal misstep. But no matter which channel you turn to, of Fox, MSNBC, or local news in cities from Phoenix to Pittsburgh, one thing was clear: she had captured the country's attention. Inside her DC townhouse, Jasmine stood at the kitchen counter, spooning oatmeal into a bowl she had no intention of eating. Dressed in a hoodie and sweatpants, her phone sat face down next to a growing pile of messages. Tyrese sat across from her, scrolling through his feed. You've got lawyers from 3 networks asking for interviews, he said. 2 universities want you to speak next week. Another request just came from The Guardian. Jasmine didn't look up. Any of them ask if I'm okay? Tyrese hesitated, caught mid-scroll. No. Just if you'll talk. She nodded. That didn't surprise her. Her inbox was a storm, half filled with media requests, the other half with warnings. Lawyers from the House Ethics Committee told her to tread carefully. Supporters sent screenshots of hate messages flooding conservative forums. A former staffer texted, "You better have security." Then there were the voicemails. One from a woman in Missouri, "Keep talking. Don't let them make you disappear." Another from an older man in Vermont, "We see what they're doing. Keep standing tall, sister." And others, darker, anonymous. Calls filled with venom. One man didn't speak at all, just breathed into the phone before hanging up. Jasmine didn't flinch. She'd been through worse. But when her mother called, it hit different. "Just tell me you're safe," her mother said, her voice low and tired. "I'm safe, Ma. They're playing dirty. They always have. You don't have to prove nothing to nobody." Jasmine paused. "I'm not proving anything. I'm reminding them who I am." While that conversation stayed private, the public was already forming its own verdict. That morning, the Baltimore Journal released a digital breakdown of every claim Jasmine made on air, each paired with direct links to official documents, FBI inventories, budget reallocations, committee memos. It was undeniable. Nothing she said was classified. Nothing was secret. A professor from Stanford reposted the article with the caption, "This is what happens when a black woman speaks plainly in a room full of people used to coded language." The post crossed 1 million likes before lunch. Even people who rarely followed politics started weighing in. Twitter threads dissected Trump Jr.'s move as a power play. TikTok creators stitched Jasmine's clip with commentary, applauding her clarity, her calm, and her refusal to walk anything back. In the White House press room, reporters finally asked the question out loud, "Does the president believe Jasmine Crockett violated national security law?" The press secretary deflected. "We defer to legal channels to handle any investigations." Which meant they didn't have an answer, or didn't like the one they had. By mid-afternoon, the narrative began to shift, not because anyone came to defend Jasmine, but because people started listening to what she'd actually said. In Ohio, a high school government teacher played the clip in class. Students debated it openly. One girl raised her hand and asked if she just said what's already public, isn't the real issue that somebody got embarrassed? That question echoed louder than any headline. Back in her office, Jasmine sat with Tyrese and a young law clerk named Amina, reviewing every document, every memo, every footnote. They stacked papers on a long conference table, building a clean, chronological timeline. "Here," Amina said, pointing to a printed memo. "This footnote cites the same FEMA budget line you mentioned. It's from 5 months ago." Jasmine nodded. "Print that. Timestamp it. You want a press packet?" "No," she said, her voice cool. "I'm thinking court exhibit." Because that was the thing about men like Trump Jr. They thought shouting treason would scare people into silence. But Jasmine wasn't scared. She was preparing receipts. And the harder they pushed, the more public her facts became. While Jasmine played the long game, her opponents prepared another move, one they wanted cameras for. At exactly 9:05 the next morning, her office received an official notice. A preliminary ethics review was underway. The memo came from the House Ethics Committee, signed by 5 members, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats. The language was vague but serious. Jasmine read the letter quietly, then placed it down like it was a grocery list. Tyrese stared at her. "They're actually going through with this?" She nodded. "They want a show? Let's give them the transcript." And she meant it. By 10 a.m., her staff published a fully annotated transcript of her CNN interview online. Every quote she'd made was matched to official documents, committee reports, DOJ briefings, GAO audits, even screenshots from Trump's own campaign filings. The references were airtight. The tone stayed steady, factual, unshaken. That afternoon, the Dallas Tribune published an op-ed titled "Weaponizing Procedure." It argued that the real threat to democracy wasn't speech, it was retaliation. Written by a retired federal judge, it called out the Ethics Committee for turning oversight into a political weapon. By then, civil liberties groups were stepping in. The Southern Coalition for Accountability called the investigation an overreach. The American Speech League demanded the inquiry be dropped, citing First Amendment violations, but while support built outside the Capitol, the atmosphere inside grew colder. On the House floor, Representative Colton Reese, an old-school Iowa politician with a love of cameras, stood during a procedural vote and called Jasmine's remarks reckless. His voice boomed for the gallery. "She put this nation at risk," he declared. "Even if she didn't mean to, the damage is done." Jasmine, sitting 3 rows back, didn't blink after the vote. She caught up with Reese in the hallway. "No cameras this time." "You read the memo I quoted?" "I'm aware of it." "Then you know it was public record." He shrugged. "Perception matters." "Then maybe you should clarify that next time," she said, "instead of putting on a show." Reese chuckled, cold and humorless. "Good luck, Congresswoman. DC doesn't reward honesty. It rewards leverage." Back in her office, Jasmine's team was already prepping for the next round, not with outrage, but with calm. Amina, the law clerk, was at the printer, stacking page after page, assembling what would become their counterbrief. Tyrese was on the phone with a legal contact in Los Angeles, coordinating a formal written response to the ethics notice. Every move was logged, every document reviewed twice. But even as they built their defense, the attacks kept coming. A right-wing PAC pushed out a slick social media ad, Jasmine's face overlaid with ominous music and the words "classified leaker" in bold red letters. News anchors dissected her tone. A morning show in Phoenix debated whether she'd gone too far. One pundit openly questioned if she was emotionally fit for higher office. That night, Jasmine went on MSNBC. The host, Lauren Braxton, known for letting her guests speak without interruption, welcomed her. Jasmine arrived ready time. "Not surprised by the backlash," she said, steady. "What I said made powerful people uncomfortable. But I didn't leak anything. I didn't speculate. I cited documents anyone can find with a simple search." Braxton leaned forward. "And what do you say to those calling this a distraction?" "I say they're finally telling the truth," Jasmine replied. "Because that's exactly what this is, a distraction from real violations of public trust. You don't get to silence people just because they tell the truth with the lights on." The clip trended within hours. People praised her composure and plain-spoken defiance. Even centrists who'd never paid her much attention started tuning in. And meanwhile in Austin, civil rights attorney Kevin Rhodes filed an amicus brief with the House Ethics Committee, formally requesting the inquiry be dismissed. He accused the committee of violating due process, pursuing a baseless investigation over publicly available, constitutionally protected remarks. The tide was starting to turn, but Jasmine didn't relax. Around midnight, with the city quiet outside, she sat at her desk with a legal pad and carefully drafted the remarks she'd give at the next morning's press briefing. She wrote slowly, pausing only to underline one sentence twice. "I don't apologize for speaking the truth. Not now. Not ever." But while Jasmine was steadying her position, those behind the probe weren't finished. The next morning arrived not with sound, but with weight, the kind that settles across your shoulders and won't lift. In her bathroom mirror, Jasmine brushed out the stubborn waves in her hair. Her eyes were tired, but her hands steady. She hadn't slept more than a few hours. It wasn't fear keeping her up, it was planning. Running through every headline, every phrase, every contingency, her phone buzzed. Tyrese's text lit up the screen. "News just broke, live oversight committee briefing at 2 p.m. "Chair's going to speak," she replied simply. "I'll be there at 8 the door." She paused for a moment, same keys, same coat, but everything felt heavier now. Not louder, just heavier. Down the street, a reporter was already posted outside her office, speaking into a camera. Jasmine didn't make eye contact. She walked straight past, head high upstairs. Her staff looked drained. Not defeated. Just worn down. Amina held 2 coffees. Tyrese paced with earbuds in, talking to someone from a media watchdog group. "They want to know if we'll release the full meeting video from the Capitol Police visit," he told her. "We hold it for now," Jasmine said, dropping her bag. Onto the table, the wall clock read 8 a.m. Still hours until the briefing, but it had already begun. "They're trying to shift the narrative," Amina said quietly. "Not about the documents. Not the facts. Just about you." "They always do," Jasmine replied. But they're late to the game. Tyrese hesitated, then asked softly, "You ever wonder if it's worth it?" She met his gaze. "Some days. It costs more than others. But you don't do this kind of work to feel safe. You do it to make other people safer." He nodded but kept his eyes LOW to at 10 a.m. A call came in from Congressman Eldridge, one of the rare allies she had across the aisle. He didn't stay on long, just enough to say he'd read the transcript and would back her publicly if the committee tried to escalate. "Eldridge never sticks his neck out," Tyrese said when the call ended. "Means they're nervous," Jasmine replied. Then Amina went quiet, eyes locked on her tablet. "What is it?" Jasmine asked. "They're digging," Amina said. "Old interviews, speeches, campaign donations, trying to find something, anything, to smear you with." Jasmine didn't flinch. "Let them. I've never hidden anything." Still, Tyrese added, "This isn't just opposition anymore. It's character assassination." Jasmine took a breath, held it, then let it go. "I've had worse." She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The room was still for a moment, then Jasmine spoke, something she hadn't shared before. "When I was in college," she began, "I interned for a councilwoman in Fort Worth. Sharp. Not always liked, but respected. She pushed too hard on a police misconduct bill, and they came for her. IRS audits. Smears in the press. Anonymous threats. She cracked. Resigned 6 months later." She looked straight at Tyrese. "She told me, the system doesn't hate liars. It hates people who won't lie for it." A long silence. "Was she right?" Amina asked quietly. "She was tired," Jasmine said. "But I'm not her." At 1:02 p.m., Jasmine stood. She straightened her blazer, wiped her phone screen clean with a cloth, tightened the strap on her watch. The fight wasn't over, it was just changing shape. Tyrese handed Jasmine the final folder. "Everything you need is in here," he said. Jasmine glanced down at it, then back at her team. "Thanks," she told them quietly. "But I already know what I'm going to say." While she readied herself for the press, the real confrontation wasn't happening in front of cameras, it was waiting inside a very public hearing room. Room 412 of the Cannon House office building was already packed before Jasmine even arrived. Cameras lined the back wall, cables snaked under chairs, microphones blinked red. The air carried that strange, artificial calm that only TV lights can create. On one side of the long oak table, the oversight committee members sat in their assigned seats. Most wore neutral expressions. A few looked impatient, ready to pounce. At 2:01 p.m., Jasmine Crockett walked through the door in a slate gray suit. Heels clicking sharp and certain across the floor. Tyrese followed, carrying a binder, nodding briefly to staffers. Amina came last, gripping a legal pad, trying to look calm. Jasmine didn't stop to greet anyone. She took her seat, adjusted the microphone, and waited. Chairman Elroy Buckner, 62, Virginia, with the performative gravitas of a high school drama teacher, cleared his throat and launched into a 5-minute monologue that sounded more like a courtroom opening than a congressional statement. "We are here today," he began, "not to target any individual, but to clarify whether any member of Congress may have overstepped legal boundaries in matters pertaining to national security." Jasmine didn't blink. She knew this framing. It always started soft, pretending the noose wasn't already tied. Buckner continued. "Congresswoman Crockett, this committee acknowledges your time is valuable. However, due to the gravity of the claims presented by Mr. Donald Trump, Jr., excuse me, Mr. Chairman," Jasmine cut in, voice even and clear. "May I ask a clarifying question before we proceed?" Buckner hesitated, caught off guard. "Proceed. Is this hearing based solely on a citizen complaint made by a private individual with no elected office or federal investigative authority?" Heads turned. Buckner cleared his throat again. "We are responding to procedural concerns raised by multiple parties, including civilian sources." "Right," Jasmine said, her tone sharper now. "So, just to be clear, the catalyst for This hearing wasn't a criminal referral, wasn't a breach of classified protocol, but a tweet? The room fell silent. Even the reporters lowered their phones for a second. From that moment, Jasmine had the floor. She opened her binder. 1. On March 11, the House Oversight Committee released a public memo outlining misuse of FEMA resources during President Trump's golf retreat. I referenced that memo, which is still publicly available on the House website. 2. Regarding the storage of classified materials, my comments were based on an unsealed FBI inventory report from August 18, also available through the Justice Department. She paused, letting the quiet stretch. I didn't speculate. I didn't reveal anything hidden. I didn't have to. The facts speak loudly enough when you're not trying to drown them out. Congressman Philip Dorn, sharp-jawed and eager to strike, leaned forward. Congresswoman, are you suggesting Mr. Trump Jr.'s concerns were politically motivated? Jasmine met his stare. I'm not suggesting. I'm stating. This wasn't about law. It was about fear. Someone got their hands caught in something messy, and the only thing more dangerous than that is a woman who knows how to name it. The atmosphere shifted, not with noise, but in the air itself. Buckner leaned back in his chair, momentarily uncertain. Dorn tried again. Some have argued your tone was inflammatory. And I'd argue, Jasmine replied, that people often confuse clarity for aggression when it comes from someone like me. She let it land, then added, would you prefer I stuttered? Silence. Outside the room, news outlets began posting clips in real time. Social media lit up. Supporters called it a master class. Even critics struggled to dismiss her, the delivery was too clean, too sharp. Jasmine ended her statement with one last line, aimed directly at the committee. I didn't come here to ask permission to tell the truth. I came to remind you that facts aren't treason. When the hearing ended, no decisions were made. No referrals issued. Just paper shuffling and staffers scrambling behind the scenes, trying to figure out what had just happened. Outside the chamber, Tyrese smiled for the first time all week. They thought they were putting you on trial, he said. Jasmine shook her head slightly. They forgot I brought the evidence. But while she'd held the room, the machine outside it was just warming up. Within hours, right-wing media flooded the airwaves. Headlines screamed, Crockett grandstands instead of answering, Congresswoman dodges accountability, Trump Jr. vindicated. On cable, conservative hosts clutched pearls and cried about decorum. They replayed Jasmine's remarks, but only in pieces, cut to sound harsher, more confrontational. Tyrese had expected it. They're not arguing against your facts, he muttered later in her office, typing furiously. They're arguing against your existence. You could have read the Constitution word for word and they'd still say you threw a grenade. Jasmine was quiet. She was scrolling too, but not the noise. She was watching for patterns. Who was echoing whom, which phrases repeated, which talking points felt a little too rehearsed. And then, at 10:45 p.m., something unusual broke the pattern. An anonymous tip landed in the inbox of Eliza Tan, an investigative reporter at the Pacific Ledger in San Francisco. The file was labeled WH Transcripts, Trump PDB 20123. Inside, partial logs of high-level briefings where classified materials were casually discussed, 2 of them after Trump had publicly claimed to have returned all sensitive documents. The story exploded within the hour. Eliza just dropped a bomb, Tyrese said, wide-eyed. They've got logs. Actual transcripts. Trump wasn't just sitting on classified material, he was talking about it in unsecured settings. Jasmine didn't celebrate. She didn't smirk. She just stared at the screen. Where'd the leak come from, she asked. Could be ex-staff, Tyrese said. Or a career intel guy who's had enough of the circus. Amina was already reading the article aloud. White House officials declined to confirm or deny the authenticity of the leaked transcripts. Legal experts suggest the logs could trigger further DOJ scrutiny, especially if corroborated. Jasmine leaned back in her chair. They were so busy chasing me, she said softly, they forgot to check their own windows. But the biggest surprise wasn't the leak itself. It was who broke their silence. Just before midnight, a statement appeared online from Brenda LaRocque, former director of national intelligence. Retired, unaffiliated, known for never speaking publicly. And she had something to say. Brenda LaRocque broke her silence. Just before midnight, the former director of national intelligence, a woman who'd served under 4 presidents and built a reputation for staying out of public fights, posted a single tweet, "I served under 4 presidents." What Crockett said was accurate. I've seen those logs. Trump Jr. picked the wrong fight. It hit 1 million views in under an hour. By morning, the spin machine was staggering. Cable hosts who'd spent days attacking Jasmine now had to report on the leak, and couldn't avoid the fact that it backed her claims. Major outlets that had treaded carefully began to shift their coverage. The narrative morphed. What had been Crockett under fire turned into was Crockett right all along. In her office, Jasmine watched the headlines with her arms crossed. She didn't grin, didn't gloat. "I'm not interested in vindication," she said quietly. "I want accountability. For the lies, for the noise, for trying to turn truth into treason." Tyrese glanced up from his screen. "So, what's the move?" Jasmine didn't answer right away. "Then, we raised the stakes." By noon, a press conference was scheduled. No carefully worded tweets, no clips for the evening shows, just Jasmine, a podium, and every camera that could squeeze into the room. When she stepped up, reporters packed 3 deep. The room felt tight with expectation. "For the past few days," Jasmine began, voice steady, "we've seen what happens when power feels threatened by facts. How easily truth can be twisted into a weapon. But let's be clear, they didn't come after me because I lied. They came after me because I didn't flinch." The words landed hard. She continued, precise and firm, "This was never about classified information. This was about distraction. About a man who panicked and picked up the phone. But that call didn't silence me. It woke people up. And now that we're awake, we're not going back to sleep." That clip didn't just trend. It spread. Voters who'd stayed quiet spoke up. Commentators from across the spectrum, left, right, and center, admitted it. Jasmine Crockett had stood in the storm and walked out cleaner than the people who sent it. But while the tide of public opinion shifted, what happened next caught everyone off guard. It started with a knock on her private office door at 7:42 p.m. Capitol Hill was nearly empty. Tyrese looked up from his desk. "You expecting someone?" Jasmine shook her head. Amina opened the door, and standing in the hallway was Senator Howard Kessler. Republican. Alabama. 68. A hardliner on national security and no friend to Jasmine's progressive wing. The room froze. "Evening," Kessler said, his voice low. "Mind if I come in?" Jasmine studied him. "If this is about damage control, you're too late." He stepped inside, eyes sweeping the room with a soldier's instinct. He looked tired. Not the theatrical kind, but the kind you carry deep in your bones. "I watched the full hearing," he said, still standing. "I read every transcript. You didn't break protocol. You didn't cross a line. That was politics, plain and simple." Amina blinked. Tyrese stared like someone had just unplugged his brain. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect that from you." "You don't have to like me," Kessler replied. "But I believe in process. I fought for a system where we don't accuse without evidence. When truth becomes a threat, we all lose." A heavy silence settled. "So what are you doing here?" Jasmine asked. Kessler reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, handing it over. A draft joint statement. Co-signed by Kessler, if she agreed. Condemning the misuse of law enforcement for political retaliation. Calling for Clearer rules on what qualifies as a national security leak from elected officials. Urging Congress to defend facts, especially when they come from public records. Jasmine read it slowly. Then met his gaze. You know, backing me puts a target on your back, right? Kessler sighed. Maybe. But this isn't about you or me. It's about whether our institutions still mean something when it matters most. I don't intend to spend my last term watching cowards with microphones rewrite the rules. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jasmine walked to her desk. You got a pen? She asked. Tyrese handed her one. She signed it without hesitation. Amina leaned in. You sure?
Yeah,
Jasmine said. Because truth means nothing. If only one side's willing to say it. By dawn, the statement hit every political feed. CNN ran the headline, Crockett, Kessler join forces in call for accountability. Conservative talk radio fumed. Some called it betrayal. Others, quietly, respected the move, and just like that, the conversation shifted again. It wasn't was Jasmine right? Anymore. It became what does it mean when the system gets weaponized? Against its own, reporters chased both lawmakers through the Capitol. Kessler gave little. Jasmine, on the other hand, offered just enough to keep the fire burning. If it can happen to me, she said in one interview, what happens to the whistleblower without a microphone? That line stuck. By afternoon, young lawmakers from both parties were reaching out. A freshman from Oregon. One from Kansas. Even a first-term rep from Mississippi sent a one-word text to respect. Amina smiled for the first time in days. Feels like the weather's changing. But Jasmine knew better. In politics, when one storm clears, it only means a bigger one's gathering behind it. And she wasn't done yet, because now, it wasn't about survival. It was about the cost of telling the truth. In Toledo, a group of high school seniors picked Jasmine's CNN interview as the centerpiece for their class debate on truth and political retaliation. In Fresno, a retired Air Force colonel posted a 3-minute video to Facebook explaining why Jasmine hadn't done anything wrong, and why, in his words, courage ain't partisan. Then came the poll numbers. A Friday release from the Dunstan Research Group showed a sharp, unexpected jump in Jasmine Crockett's favorability ratings, especially among independents aged 30 to 49, and even more dramatically with first-time voters under 25. Tyrese read the numbers out loud in the office, trying to sound calm but visibly electrified. You're up 14 points since last week. 14. He looked at her. Do you know what that means? Jasmine was quiet for a beat. It means we keep going, she said. It wasn't false modesty. It was a quiet acknowledgement of what the last 10 days had taken from her, things no poll could measure. The sleepless nights. The upgraded security. The worry in her family's voices. The endless second-guessing that lived in her own head. Earlier that week, in the silence after midnight, Jasmine had stood alone in her kitchen staring at a crumpled note from her niece. The handwriting was clumsy but sweet. TT Jasmine, don't let bad people make you sad. You are brave. I told my class. She kept that note in her coat pocket every day after. But even as the public noise surged around her, the quiet inside never did. After the joint statement with Senator Kessler went public, some members of her own party began to pull away. Nothing overt. Just a little less eye contact. Fewer texts. The Thursday dinner crew stopped sending invites. Jasmine noticed. She just didn't say anything. Instead, she started holding her own briefings. Talking to small-town papers national outlets ignored. Visiting colleges in rural counties. Calling up local public radio stations and asking if they had any questions about ethics reforms or security policies. One afternoon, she made an unannounced stop at a community center in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. No press. No campaign staff. Just working people who didn't ask about poll numbers or party drama. They asked about rent. About medical bills. About student Loans. Jasmine didn't show up with slogans. She came with details. And people listened. In the car after, Amina turned to her. You know they're going to ask you to run for something bigger now. Jasmine looked out the window. Then they better ask the right question. She wasn't interested in being groomed for a political career. She wasn't here to be packaged or polished. She was here because she remembered what it felt like to be talked over. To be told she was too direct, too angry, too much, when all she'd done was speak plain truth without dressing it up. Back in D.C., another scandal was breaking, this one about security clearances inside the administration, directly tied to the leaks that had proven Jasmine right. But this time, Jasmine wasn't at the center of the firestorm. And that was how she wanted it. She'd taken the hit. She'd held the line. Now it was time for others to carry it forward. One night, Tyrese found her alone in the dimly lit conference room, scrolling through emails. He sat across from her. You ever wonder what it would have been like if you hadn't said it that day? If you kept it vague, like they wanted? Jasmine set the tablet down. Every day. She paused. But then I remember, I didn't come here to be safe. I came here to be honest. She grabbed her coat. You coming? He followed, no more words needed. But even as Jasmine moved ahead, the question lingered, how much truth can one person carry before it starts to change them? And what would she leave behind in her fight to hold the line? 2 weeks after the hearing, the headlines had mostly moved on. The PACs shifted focus. Trump Jr. was back to ranting about gas prices. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. She refused to let the moment fade without tethering it to something bigger. Not a rally. Not a fundraiser. A town hall. In person. No teleprompters. No handlers. It happened in a modest community center in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Not a political stronghold. Not a safe district. Just a working-class town with cracked sidewalks and real questions. Folding chairs filled the room. No stage, no graphics. Just a mic stand and a small podium. Jasmine walked in wearing a plain navy blue dress. And flats. She waved but didn't grin for the cameras, because there weren't any. When she spoke, it wasn't loud. It was steady. I want to thank you for showing up, she began. That matters. Showing up still matters in this country. She scanned the faces. I've been through a lot these past couple of weeks. Accused. Investigated. Dragged online for saying things that were already public. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were inconvenient. A quiet murmur moved through the crowd. And I'm not here tonight to rehash that. I'm here to say this, the biggest threat to democracy isn't disagreement. It's distraction. She let it land. They wanted you to focus on my tone. My delivery. Not the facts. Not the misuse of public funds. Not the mishandling of sensitive materials. Just me. A man in the third row nodded. And that's not just about politics, she went on. It's about how easily we get pulled away from the truth when it's dressed up in noise. We see it at work. At home. The moment someone speaks truth, someone else calls it trouble. She paused. And here's what I've learned, telling the truth will cost you comfort. Status. Maybe even friends. But it gives you something better. It gives you clarity. Alignment. Peace. A teenager in the front raised his hand. Do you ever wish you'd stayed quiet? Jasmine took a breath. I've thought about it. But then I remember, silence helps someone else stay comfortable in their lie. And I can't live with that. Another hand. An older woman. Do you feel safe now? Jasmine nodded. Safe. Enough. But safety's never been the goal. I'd rather be free. The applause started soft. Then it built. Not staged. Not for show. Real. Earned. After the event, she stayed to talk one-on-one. No press. No optics. Just people. And hours. Later, in the car, she finally let herself exhale. Tyrese glanced over. You think they're done coming for you? Jasmine started the engine. No, she said, a faint smile at the edge of her mouth. But they'll have to come correct this time. The road ahead wasn't easy. But she wasn't chasing easy. She was chasing truth. And maybe that's what real leadership looks like, not the kind that seeks the spotlight, but the kind that shines when someone tries to switch it off. Output in.